The Voice and Idol, where they introduce us to incredible new talent.
And while we know our homegrown stars this morning, we're meeting a young man who stole the show in the UK's Britain's Got Talent.
Jonathan Antoine didn't win Britain's Got Talent, but his impressive voice wowed the judges so much, Simon Cowell gave him a record deal anyway.
What happens when a voice defies not just expectations, but gravity? Lifting itself from the depths of trauma, bullying, and silence to reach the heights of international acclaim. Jonathan Antoine's journey from an anxious, overweight teenager mocked for his appearance to a world-renowned tenor is more than a music story. It's a revelation. How does a child once crippled by fear become a global sensation? What unseen battles did he fight behind the spotlight? And what secret, undiscovered for 28 years, finally made sense of his entire life? This is not just about talent. It's about truth, transformation, and the voice behind the silence. The voice behind the silence. The Jonathan Antoine story. In 2012, the world met a boy who defied expectations in a matter of minutes. Jonathan Antoine, 17 years old, with a round face, unruly hair, and nerves so heavy they weighed more than his body ever did, walked onto the stage of Britain's Got Talent and changed everything.
I'm still realizing it, I suppose, every day that I'm able to go out and to perform for people and to affect someone in some way, I feel that I realize that all over again. I realize the power that music and that art has. It's a pretty wonderful thing.
He sang only once, but that one moment echoed across the globe. His voice, operatic and soaring, captivated millions, while his story, much quieter until then, was one of deep pain, resilience, and extraordinary talent. Jonathan's story doesn't begin on a big stage or in a recording booth. It begins in Chigwell, Essex, where he was born on January 13th, 1995. On paper, it looked like an ideal place to grow up, a quiet, suburban community. But for Jonathan, childhood was far from peaceful. From his earliest years, he felt like an outsider. At age 4, the bullying started. Children mocked his weight, threw food at him, and left him isolated. Teachers found him crying alone, often unable to explain what was wrong. The emotional wounds ran deep and lasted long. Food quickly became his comfort. Eating provided the sense of control and calm that the outside world never did. By the age of 5, Jonathan was already 40 pounds overweight. By 6, he tipped the scales at 95 pounds, more than double the average for his age. The bullying only escalated. Lunch hours became war zones. Classmates called him names and hurled things at him. Every insult drove him deeper into himself, and food was always there to fill the void. Yet something extraordinary was happening in parallel. Jonathan had an ear unlike most children. By the age of 6, he exhibited signs of perfect pitch, an ability to identify musical notes with absolute precision, something only 1 in 10,000 people possess. It was the first clue that something unique was hidden beneath the layers of pain and isolation. Music became his secret world. He hummed melodies to calm himself. He began composing full pieces in his mind. No one noticed then, but he was living with an extraordinary gift. Yet, despite the sanctuary music provided, Jonathan's days remained a battleground. His weight isolated him, but it was the loneliness that truly cut deep. At home, the world was quieter, safer, but it was also a place where the complexities of his emotions sometimes overwhelmed him. His parents, though loving, struggled to understand the magnitude of his inner turmoil. They celebrated his musical talent, yet the shadow of his weight and the cruelty he faced at school often went unspoken. Jonathan's music was his rebellion against despair, a way to reclaim power in a life that frequently felt out of control. As he immersed himself in melodies and harmonies, he found a rare form of freedom, a momentary escape where the judgment of others couldn't reach him. With each note, He wove a story of hope and resilience, even if he didn't fully realize it at the time. Music wasn't just a distraction, it was a lifeline. And beneath the surface of his struggles, this lifeline grew stronger. It prepared him for the moments ahead, moments where his talent would be tested, where he would face not only external challenges, but the profound task of healing and self-acceptance. Jonathan's journey was no longer just about battling his weight or the bullies. It was about finding harmony within himself, transforming pain into beauty, and learning to believe in the music that had always lived inside him. This was only the beginning of a remarkable story that would inspire those who heard it. The more he was bullied, the more he retreated into music. But his mother, Julie, saw the signs. As his emotional state deteriorated, she sought help. Therapy after therapy, consultation after consultation, all led to the same confusion. Eventually, medical experts provided an answer that helped frame his struggles. Jonathan was diagnosed with trauma-induced hyperphagia, a rare condition seen in less than 2% of bullied children. It explained his intense relationship with food, his rapid weight gain, and his emotional eating habits.
And I had an incredibly tough time dealing with it. So,
Is this where some of the bullying took place?
That was more in and throughout school.
Yeah.
I found that a lot, actually going to the private school, some people were slightly more mature than that.
Yeah.
The turning point in Jonathan's musical life came unexpectedly when he was just 10 years old. A substitute choir teacher named Mrs. Williams organized routine auditions at his school. Jonathan, like always, tried to avoid the spotlight. He stood at the back, hoping to go unnoticed. But when he sang, something magical happened. His voice filled the room, not the voice of a shy child, but of a trained adult tenor. Mrs. Williams would later say it sounded like Luciano Pavarotti had possessed a boy's body. His range and natural vibrato were staggering. Vibrato typically takes decades to develop. Jonathan had it innately. From that moment, his life began to change. He started performing solos written for adults, commanding attention without even using a microphone. His voice was measured at 95 decibels, loud enough to fill a concert hall. Teachers and musicians alike recognized that what they were witnessing was one of the most significant discoveries in British music education in years. And for Jonathan, who had been invisible for so long, it was the first time his identity brought admiration, not shame. By age 15, Jonathan took a major leap. He entered the Stratford and East London Music Festival. He was up against 47 seasoned singers, many with formal training and years of stage experience. Jonathan weighed nearly 298 pounds and stood just over 5 feet tall. His chosen piece, the iconic Nessun Dorma. His biggest competitor was Victoria Sterling, a 17-year-old prodigy who had already performed at the Royal Opera House. Yet, when Jonathan sang, something miraculous happened. Nearly 2,000 people packed into a venue designed for just 1,200. His performance received a standing ovation that lasted more than 4 minutes. One of the judges, the revered Sir David Wilcox, gave him a score of 98 out of 100, the highest in the festival's history, and extended him a recording offer on the spot. That same year, Jonathan auditioned for the junior program at the Royal Academy of Music, one of the most prestigious training grounds for young musicians in the UK. The competition was fierce. Only 23 candidates were accepted from a pool of over 2,800 applicants. Jonathan, so overwhelmed by nerves, vomited twice before his audition. But when he sang, his vocal control, tone, and maturity stunned the judges. One teacher even remarked that his voice sounded like it belonged to someone 10 years older. Recognizing his family's financial hardship, the school waived the annual £8,000 tuition fee. Weekends became grueling but fulfilling. Jonathan attended 6 hours of vocal technique classes, 4 hours of music theory, and 2 hours of performance coaching. The other students initially ignored him because of his weight and introverted personality. But after just 3 months, he landed the lead role in Mozart's The Magic Flute. becoming the youngest person in the Academy's history to do so. In 2011, a new chapter began when his high school music teacher, Jenny Ewington, made a pairing that would change his life again. She introduced Jonathan to Charlotte Giaconelli, a confident, outgoing 16-year-old who had been performing since she was 8. Jonathan was the polar opposite, quiet, nervous, and filled with self-doubt. But when they sang together, their voices fused into something magical. Jonathan's rich tenor, ranging from C3 to C5, and Charlotte's sparkling soprano, C4 to C6, created a blend that producers and music teachers described as once in a generation. But their partnership wasn't without friction. Jonathan's anxiety often got the better of him. Before rehearsals, he would have panic attacks and sometimes lock himself in the bathroom. Charlotte became his anchor, calming him down, bringing him back, and helping him refocus. To build his confidence, they began performing locally. Between February and April of 2012, they sang at 23 small venues: churches, retirement homes, weddings, and even pubs. Their first paid gig was an Easter service where they each earned £50. A standout performance at the Epping Forest Country Club in front of 200 people brought the house down. The 5-minute standing ovation led to multiple bookings and the interest of talent scouts. Charlotte was the one who discovered auditions were open for Britain's Got Talent. Jonathan flat out refused to audition. He didn't want to be mocked on national television. For 3 weeks, Charlotte pleaded with him. She even told him she'd audition alone if he didn't agree. Finally, with just 13 minutes left before the deadline, she submitted their application. Their audition tape was simple, filmed in Charlotte's bedroom. Jonathan barely looked at the camera. When producers called, they only showed interest in Charlotte. But she gave them an ultimatum. It's both of us, or neither. The audition was scheduled for April 28th at the London Palladium. Jonathan, who had never taken public transport alone, was so anxious that Charlotte stayed overnight at his house to make sure he didn't back out. The audition would become one of the most iconic moments in British television history. As they stepped onto the stage, Jonathan wore a simple t-shirt, his hair uncombed, his hands shaking. Before he even sang, Simon Cowell turned to fellow judge Carmen Electra and whispered cruelly, "Just when you thought it couldn't get any worse." That moment, captured on camera, became a viral sensation, highlighting the brutal judgments faced by people based solely on appearance. And then Jonathan sang. Together, he and Charlotte performed The Prayer, a duet made famous by Andrea Bocelli and Celine Dion. Within seconds, the audience rose to their feet. People cried. Judges were stunned.
It actually came at such a difficult time for you.
Yeah, absolutely. It was definitely a very strange period of my life.
Yeah.
I'd just transferred schools for sixth form. I'd gotten a scholarship for music to a private school.
Simon Cowell, the same man who had mocked Jonathan moments before, looked speechless. All 4 judges gave a resounding yes. What followed was an explosion of global attention. Their audition was uploaded to YouTube on March 24, 2012, and within weeks had racked up over 2.6 million views. It quickly became the most watched audition in the history of the show. International media compared Jonathan to Susan Boyle. Religious leaders and celebrities alike shared the video. Suddenly, a boy who once sat alone in school hallways crying was now a global star. But with the fame came pressure. Jonathan still suffered from anxiety, and the attention only magnified it. During the show's semi-finals, he battled panic just to stay on stage. Despite everything, they delivered a flawless performance of Caruso. Even Simon Cowell, now fully converted, called them his favorite act of the entire season. And yet, controversy surfaced again in the form of Simon's advice. He told Jonathan to leave Charlotte and pursue a solo career. But Jonathan refused. "We came here as a duo. We'll stay as a duo," he said. That decision won him widespread respect, and it showed a strength few expected from someone so shy. In the final, Jonathan and Charlotte were expected to win, but they lost to Ashley Butler and her dancing dog, Pudsey, who won with 39% of the vote. Jonathan and Charlotte placed second with 25.8%. Fans were devastated. Many believed the outcome was more about entertainment than talent. But Simon Cowell didn't wait long. The very next day, he signed the duo to a record deal reportedly worth £1 million. Their debut album, Together, was released in September 2012. It included their most popular performances, such as The Prayer and Caruso. The album charted in the UK top 10 and sold over 250,000 copies. The timing was carefully planned to coincide with live shows from The X Factor, another one of Cowell's major productions. Jonathan was in disbelief. "I'm still pinching myself that we're actually making our own CD," he said in an interview. The success was massive, and for the first time in his life, Jonathan felt accepted, celebrated, and seen, not for how he looked, but for what he could do, a turn towards solo stardom. Following the release of Together in September 2012, an album featuring their iconic duets like The Prayer and Caruso, which cracked the UK top 10 and sold upwards of 250,000 copies, Jonathan and Charlotte faced a crossroads. Their debut had succeeded massively, but the creative differences between them were widening. Released October 14, 2013, their sophomore album, Perhaps Love, rose to number 5 on the UK charts. Yet it also exposed their diverging musical inclinations.
And 5 successful albums later, the singer is still showing off those powerful pipes.
Jonathan's heart remained tied to classical opera. Charlotte leaned toward musical theater and modern crossover. A tension simmered beneath the music. In early 2014, the joint announcement came. They would part ways. Behind the scenes, months of arguments over song choices, tone, and creative direction had reached breaking point. The record label, Sony, made a rare offer: simultaneous solo contracts for both artists. Charlotte moved quickly with her solo album Solitaire in June 2014, then debuted professionally on stage in February 2015, starring as Amalia Balash in She Loves Me at London's Landor Theatre. Meanwhile, Jonathan prepared for a solo debut filled with weighty expectations. October 2014 marked the arrival of Jonathan's solo debut, Tenor, featuring 12 tracks of classical opera. At just 19 years old, he became the youngest tenor ever to top the official UK Classical Artist Album chart. The album also reached number 13 on the overall UK pop chart, an extraordinary crossover achievement. Even more meaningful than the charts was the acknowledgement from Placido Domingo, who invited Jonathan to perform as his special guest at the iTunes Festival in London. For a young singer who had once hidden from the world, it was a signal. He had arrived. His next bold move came years later, culminating in June 2020 with the release of Going the Distance, a sweeping concept album recorded with the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra and produced by Grammy winner Greg Field. This ambitious work, divided into 3 acts, traced Jonathan's journey from isolation and early trauma to acceptance and artistic triumph. PBS aired a live concert special on March 15, 2021, showcasing Jonathan at age 25 in full artistic bloom, his vocals soaring and his emotional story laid bare. In 2024, he released By Request, the Diane Warren Songbook, Volume 1, 8 tracks, 33 minutes long, featuring songs penned by the legendary Diane Warren, who has written for Celine Dion, Lady Gaga, Aerosmith, and many others. The juxtaposition of Jonathan's classical roots with Diane Warren's contemporary pop sensibility created a powerful blend, further expanding his musical reach without compromising his integrity. While his career was thriving, Jonathan continued to face personal challenges. After the sudden rise to fame on Britain's Got Talent, anxiety attacks plagued him, especially before performances and interviews. But he refused to be defined by fear or his appearance. He stuck more firmly than ever to his classical ethos and stage-wise discipline. revelation, transformation, and new beginnings. Jonathan's life took another dramatic turn in early 2023, shortly after his 27th birthday during an interview in Australia. He revealed that he had been diagnosed with autism, a truth kept private for 28 years. In an emotional moment, he described the diagnosis as both terrifying and liberating. For the first time, the years of emotional confusion, deep anxiety, social exhaustion, and internal isolation made sense. He wasn't broken. He was autistic. As World Autism Awareness Day approached, Jonathan shared a heartfelt message on Instagram. He candidly explained how the diagnosis reframed his entire life. The emotional overload during interviews, sensory exhaustion during engagements, the voice that soared while his body stayed bound by fear. Seeing the world through this new lens wasn't a crutch. It was clarity. Fans and followers responded overwhelmingly, praising his honesty and vulnerability. Many shared that his story gave them courage to seek their own diagnosis or own their experiences. Physical health, too, became part of Jonathan's journey of self-discovery. Since his childhood, weight had been a source of shame and control. At the time of Britain's Got Talent in 2012, he weighed about 280 pounds. After success, he joined Weight Watchers in 2013 and lost more than 50 pounds in just 4 months. By early adulthood, he had shed roughly 5 stone, around 70 pounds, and maintained it. A significant breakthrough came when doctors finally identified an underactive thyroid, a diagnosis that explained why weight loss had been so difficult in earlier years. Once treated, his body responded. On January 12, 2014, Jonathan made a firm personal commitment: walk 10,000 steps a day. He adopted this as a non-negotiable routine. To this day, he's only missed it twice, regardless of touring, performances, or travel. Walking was more than exercise. It was structure for a mind that often felt unanchored. It cleared fog, burned calories, and grounded his day. In his words, "I feel stronger and healthier than I have in 10 years." That strength became a metaphor for his entire life transformation. Love entered his life in an unexpected way. In 2016, while searching online for companionship and perhaps solace, he met Michelle Doucet, a waitress from Canada, through a chat service. Their connection was slow to blossom, at first based on messages, then video calls. Eventually, Michelle flew frequently to the UK to support his music career and emotional journey. She became his muse, support system, creative confidant. Their relationship influenced his album, Believe, and Jonathan called Michelle the light of my life. Though they lived half a world apart, their bond remained steady amid touring, recording, and emotional challenges. Over time, his professional relationship with Charlotte grew distant. By 2017, Jonathan said they barely spoke. The intensity of solo careers, studio work, and public attention left little room for reconnection. What had once been an extraordinary duet became a memory, beautiful but irretrievable. In the midst of all this, a long-awaited documentary began to take shape. Filmmaker David J. Baird took on the project, working around 2023 and into 2024. Tentatively titled Beyond the High Sea, the film promises a full account of Jonathan's life, the relentless childhood bullying, the early signs of musical genius, the rise on Britain's Got Talent, and the long-overdue autism diagnosis. The documentary is designed to include never-before-seen footage, from home videos to acoustic recordings, and provide insights into Jonathan's emotional world, bringing depth and reflection to the man behind the voice. Today, Jonathan Antoine's net worth is estimated at around $4 million. His YouTube channel has amassed over 64 million views, generating roughly $190,000 in ad revenue alone. On Spotify, he maintains around 50,000 monthly listeners. Critically, his solo albums Tenor and Believe both reached #1 on the UK classical charts. Despite offers to pivot into more commercial or pop-leaning ventures, he has remained rooted in classical and operatic tradition, never trading his artistry for trends. What strikes observers most is how Jonathan has woven his vulnerabilities into his art. He hasn't shied away from discussing panic attacks, the toll of early fame, or the emotional weight carried from childhood. Instead, he incorporated them into concept albums, interviews, public messages, and now this documentary. He channels emotional truth through music. Every countdown to a concert, every breath before a note, each lyric becomes part of a larger narrative of survival and expression. Jonathan Antoine's story is more than a timeline of albums and performances. It is a vivid illustration of human complexity. A bullied child becomes a global tenor. A shy, overweight teenager becomes an artist celebrated for voice and vulnerability. His public confession of autism at age 27 illuminated decades of misunderstanding, for him and for others like him. His weight loss journey, love story with Michelle, and embrace of daily routine and honesty map a path from darkness toward control, stability, and creativity. At every stage, Jonathan balanced external achievement with internal healing. His solo career flourished not because he changed who he was, but because he accepted who he was. As of 2025, he continues to record, perform, and advocate, combining mental health awareness, neurodiversity visibility, and musical excellence. His voice remains the constant that first captivated a global audience, but now it carries something deeper, a message of authenticity, of transformation, of hope. In the end, his life rings with irony. He who once hid from the world under layers of weight and silence now stands center stage, voice blazing, truth exposed, purpose clear. Every struggle, every note, every disclosure, woven into art that breaks boundaries and builds bridges. This, in essence, is the story of Jonathan Antoine, a journey from isolation and suffering to fame and compassion, from silent pain to soaring voice, from buried identity to visible, resonant, unstoppable self. Jonathan Antoine's story isn't just one of triumph, it's one of evolution. From a bullied boy hiding behind his weight and fear, to a world-class tenor embracing his voice, identity, and autism, he has reshaped what it means to succeed on your own terms. His journey forces us to ask, how many extraordinary voices are silenced by shame, misunderstanding, or fear? And how many more could rise if only they were heard? In finding his voice, Jonathan didn't just sing, he spoke for every person who ever felt unseen. His music is his legacy, but his courage is what makes it unforgettable.